I got to tell you before we begin, even though it's all public, I'm so delighted that this book is out. I think it's such a fantastic book. I'm so happy for you. There's nobody I'd rather be up here with than you. We've been friends for a long time now, so this is just a great honor for me.
Thank you. Thank you for me too.
So I'm going to ask Matt some questions, and I'll probably weave in some reading so that we can get a better sense of the book than what we've just got, and it'll also kind of hopefully contextualize some of the questions that I'm asking, so we can get a sense of what happens over the course of this book. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the first 100 pages or so starts us off with an earlier generation of Irish immigrants. We get a good sense of, how those immigrants came to New York and what they needed to do to survive. And nobody is better delineated than Eileen's father, Big Mike. And Eileen, obviously, from what you read, we can tell she becomes the main focal point of the book. But Big Mike is this larger-than-life character. So I want you to read a passage on page 6 that describes Big Mike Leary.
They laughed at everything he said unless he was being serious, and then they put on grave faces. They held forth on the topic of his virtues as though he weren't standing right there. Half of them he'd gotten jobs for off the boat, at Schaefer, at Macy's, behind the bar, as supers or handymen. Everybody called him Big Mike. He was reputed to be immune to pain. He had shoulders so broad that even in shirt sleeves he looked like he was wearing a suit jacket. His fists were the size of babies' heads, and in the trunk he resembled one of the kegs of beer he carried in the crook of each elbow. He put no effort into his physique apart from his labor, and he wasn't muscle-bound, just country strong. If you caught him in a moment of repose, he seemed to shrink to normal proportions. If you had something to hide, he grew before your eyes.
This is really great stuff. It's very mythical. The language you use creates this myth out of Big Mike. And he's a nice counterpoint to his wife, who becomes kind of your typical alcoholic. And she's also described in these kind of mythical ways, larger than life. And I think they're the ways that we think of first generation immigrants. Can you tell me what was important about them to start the book off this way, and the dynamic of the Irish immigrant family?
Well, first I wanted to provide a backdrop against which to understand Eileen in the context of her whole life. But more importantly, I wanted to provide a sense of what it is, just glancingly, that is left behind in Ireland, and that is left behind by any immigrant group when they come here, which is that sense of a kind of authentic personality that's unreconstructed. That's original in a way that is really hard to access a couple of generations later. And Big Mike is a guy who his compatriots immediately recognize for what he is, which is a fixer, a guy who can do anything, a guy who they see as a moral authority of sorts, a guy they confess to, a guy they lean on. We don't exactly hear all of the ways that this happens, but we have come to understand that he plays a role for them. And part of what that is for them, I think, is his authenticity as a person, the gravity of his self-awareness, which is interesting because he makes mistakes in his life that belie that. But I wanted that to be the backdrop against which other generations in the book, Eileen's generation, Connell's generation, become more fully American over time.
What's interesting is that, you said that they're not recognizable after a couple of generations, which is true, firsthand. But when you're reading, he's instantly recognizable as an immigrant and as somebody who's striving for, to learn the ways of the land and also to sort of become expert in them.
Well, I think he just takes the reality that he's faced with and then does what he can with it. He is a guy who can only have the job that he has. It turns out that he can rise even himself in the ranks, in becoming a manager at Schaefer. But the presumption for him is to make the best of what he has. And I think that changes even into Eileen's generation, which is make something more than the best that I've been presented with. And that morphs even later into, let me just try to do what they did before me as well as they did it, because there are no more opportunities in a way. That's sort of Connell's experience because of the changes demographically and the general shift, which we don't have to get into, but economically over time, and the way opportunities sort of winnow in some ways, even though we have this huge explosion in capital.
He's got this interesting thing that he does early on. He kind of puts a hex on her, and when he's got a curse up. It says, "I will." What is it? I will.
If you're not in the house by the time I'm dead, I'll haunt you from my grave. He says.
Right. That's pleasant.
Yeah. That's as affectionate as they get. There's a lot of love in that. Well, I mean, he's looking out for. I mean, that's part of what they do, right? It's just the desperate desire to ensure, the furtherance of the gene pool.
Yeah, in a weird way, it's a way of loving.
Yeah.
But it's nice because you have to wonder for the rest of the book. This happens on page 60, and for the rest of the book, you're like, as things go down, oh my God, Big Mike,
he cursed her. Yeah, absolutely.
Making good on his
yes,
word.
Yeah.